Evening, everybody. Thank you for remaining glued to your seat and not giving in to the temptation to go to the bar for food and drinks. Really appreciated. Yeah, exactly. Conference talks, not drinks. Yeah, that's exciting. Wonderful to see you all here again. Lots of friendly faces in the audience. It's been a fantastic evening so far, catching up with people that I haven't seen for 18 months, almost 2 years. And I'm looking forward to getting out there for the drinks, of course, once I've listened to the last speaker, because I'm courteous. Today, we're going to talk about web development practices and what I like to refer to as building with the best of them, be it adaptive or web practices, that is. So who are we and who am I to stand on the stage and make a claim about what the best web development practices are? We are a technology provider. We build front office trading infrastructure for firms like the ones in this room. We started in 2012. We have offices in London, New York, Barcelona, Montreal. We've delivered over 100 solutions since we got started, and we have about 230 people in the organization at the moment. We design and deliver into complex organizations, large sell-side, buy-side, venue and exchange businesses, and we deliver client sales and trading-facing platforms, anything in or around liquidity data and liquidity distribution infrastructure. We do real-time data distribution from the cloud and on-premises and event-driven collaborative workflows. And most of all, we like building immersive, intuitive user interfaces for desktop and mobile, which now we do wholly in web, and in some cases native mobile. So what have we seen and what do we think about the state of web UI development in our industry at the moment? So at the moment, we have about 70 web developers in the organization. Over the last few years, about 60 of our projects have included some sort of UI built in the web. We have done all of this work across trading platforms, and we've built from very large-scale institutional, multi-team, multi-year, multi-monitor applications, all the way down to very early-stage prototyping, MVPs, build it, get some investment, throw it away, and then go on and build the real thing. We really have done all across that spectrum. And as well, increasingly in the last few years, PWA and reactive native and mobile native applications as well. We don't think that UI development in banks is going very well at all, I'm sorry to say, folks. Everyone says they're doing it properly because they're in finance and because of the value of what we do, but we just don't think that's the case. We've seen dozens of projects across the industry where we weren't involved in the creation of the architecture and the approach, and there's a lot going wrong. And I'm not just talking about the development itself, I'm talking about the entire delivery process. You've got QAs not being in sync with developers, BAs not being in sync with devs, project managers who aren't in sync with anyone, and business stakeholders looking at what's getting delivered and asking big questions about what they're paying for. We don't think we should be adding any more people to your teams. More developers writing more code that has to be tested manually is not the answer to the problems we have at the moment. The issues are a lack of prepared infrastructure, lack of investment in the right things to get started to maintain velocity all the way through the project lifecycle, and this discovery that you suddenly have a huge amount of functionality that you've built in the first few months of a project that you now need to carry the weight of and no time to improve the tooling of the development lifecycle. After 6 to 9 months, everything starts slowing down. The cost to fix it is too big, so you just keep going increasingly slowly, hoping to improve your timelines by adding more developers. It's not going to work, I'm afraid. If this sounds familiar to you, we would like to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about how we think it could be done differently. If you're tired of constant regressions, tired of UI quality degradation for new features, the overall slowdown of development velocity and not being able to release, you're in the right room. So what's happening? Well, we see a lot of different things going wrong across UI development in the organization, but there's a few anecdotes that I'd like to share that probably map to some of your experiences. Often there's a bit of initial inertia trying to get the back end up and running. Maybe people are busy ordering servers to have them deployed into data centers, if that's still how you're doing delivery of technology. You're hiring a bunch of developers. You're not yet sure how big the project is going to be in terms of headcount, so you just get a bunch of devs in, a bunch of front-end devs. They don't really have requirements yet. There's no back end to speak of, so they start prototyping UI and building UI component kits for 3 to 4 months while the back end API starts being worked on. The first thing the front-end team does is they go build a UI component library. That's visual, that can be shown to people, that looks like value, right? For 5 months before actually engaging with the project requirements. This leads to the wrong thing being built, and then when the delivery of actual business value gets started, there's a massive impedance mismatch between what the UI components were set to deliver and what's actually required, and the development is slow and inefficient. So alternatively, you get UI projects staffed and they just decide to front run the entire project. They have requirements, they have a good UX person on board, they just start developing. The back end can't keep up, so they just run 4 or 5 months ahead of the back end, and then when integration finally arrives, because the back end has stood up some APIs, nothing actually fits together. Correlation IDs don't match, the domain model's different, nothing really works. Alternatively, you could start by hiring a gun team of UI developers, and then you immediately have a lot of discussion amongst very smart, very reasonable people about the best development toolchain, meaning there's very little consensus about what's actually needed to get going. This is a real problem. You need strong opinions before you've started to provide a strong framework within which you can run modern development practices. You may have noticed that it's getting harder and harder to find good developers. What you need is tooling to allow you to have less developers. More developers producing more code that requires more manual testing with more manual deployments and more communication overheads will not give you the speed up that you need. We'd like to hear, and I'm standing here today to talk a little bit about the tooling we use to stop that from happening. Ensuring you're delivering quickly is one thing, but maintaining that speed is another and is just as important and a lot harder to achieve. So all of these issues with web development we've been wrestling with over COVID. We've taken the 18 months of where we were all working from home in our pajamas like Gavin to think pretty heavily and clearly about ways we could improve the state of web development in the financial services industry. And we want to take you through it tonight. So how should things work? Well, we think you need to keep your back end and your front end in sync. You need to enable things to be developed apart with a small amount of agreement in between the two different teams so that things can be work properly when they're connected in the future. You want to use a model to specify the contract between front end and back ends via a domain-specific language, which means you can confidently let your front end run ahead of your back end, or vice versa, should you need to. How do we achieve this? Well, we have a domain-specific language in our platform that we use to define client-server contracts. This means that developers can agree in an API before they start developing on a sprint and start working in a disconnected fashion. The front end can get ahead of the back end can get ahead of the front end, and if changes occur, they are communicated via the schema so that they can be integrated. You can see here a very simple example of a DSL file defining a few different message contracts. Down the bottom, a pricing service with some annotations around authentication, and a service contract for getting prices and getting a history of prices as well. What that turns into, via the magic of code generation, is the world's simplest FX SDP. With a simple call on the left-hand side, that's the entire React application laid out on a single page. An example of the code gen that we get from the service contract on the right-hand side, you can get streaming prices just like that. Very simple tooling focused on the domain problems we see in front office capital markets. We build complex, event-driven streaming applications, and that's what we've done since we've started the business. We have done a lot of these different projects. So when we start a new project today, that project benefits from all of the experimentation that's gone on beforehand. Any project we start is based on all the learnings that we've built up in the organisation since we started. We try to build and have strong opinions about the right tools to use so that when we start a project for our clients, we don't spend weeks, months, sometimes years arguing about the state management library, for example, to use within React. And where we see gaps, we go and invest, and we create via open source libraries that we think the community should use instead. And this is what we did most recently with React RxJS. So RxJS is a great way to handle streaming events, or streams of events, I should say, and React is a great way to build web UIs. React, weirdly, isn't reactive, but React and RxJS makes it so. So we invested heavily in this, open sourced it, and now use it for all our projects. There's a great website, great getting started. This has all come from the community and some developers that worked for us at the time when they did this work, and we continue to contribute. Most importantly, it gives you very fast applications, which is what we actually want. It reduces the amount of boilerplate code you have to have in your React app to wire up to backends to create really fast performant apps that do very well on Lighthouse tests, which after all is about the user experience, and that's what's most important. Testing. So testing is definitely a must to begin with, not something you can add later. The complexity of financial applications makes automation testing crucial. We see teams wasting huge amounts of time on regression testing. On top of that, tech stacks and requirements change frequently. You need the confidence to make big changes, which means you need to be testing from the outside in, black box testing as much as you possibly can. Automated testing, covering a broad base of functionality as you possibly can manage, is critical. Increasing the scope and complexity of your UI code base, and then having one developer spend 2 or 3 weeks trying to automate the testing of all of it, all the while the code base keeps growing, is not the way to do it. It's going to hurt badly. That just results in an unmaintainable mess that the team isn't bought into and won't make proper use of. You need a reference architecture and a working implementation that shows value immediately to ensure your team will continue to invest in and use your testing framework. So automation, UI integration, as much end-to-end black box testing as you can, including between client and server, and the ability to do proactive user testing is an absolute must. We've taken Cypress and extended it to enable stream testing. You can see here our Showcase FX SDP, which is open source, running within a Cypress test framework that runs on a user's desktop, on a UI developer's desktop, to make sure what they're doing works correctly, including UX visualization of everything that's happening. Hugely powerful and really good at maintaining velocity as your development team scales and as your complexity and functionality in the application scales as well. So what about UX and design? Equally very, very important for how we build applications for our users. We really want to avoid reinventing the wheel when we design applications for our clients. They all want something that looks like themselves, that differentiates them and makes them stand out in the market, but no one wants to spend time building from the absolute bare bones basics every single time. So we have a design kit focused on financial services and capital markets that we use to build applications, as well as the ability to plug everything into Storybook to enable developers, testers, UX folk to experiment with the application, work it through all its different states without having to spin it up and get it deployed into an actual environment. This is a huge accelerator for development and lets you throw new functionality into the application exceptionally quickly. So that's how we accelerate UI development. That's what your process could look like. If you'd like to learn more about working with us in this process or working for us with this process, come and talk to me and my team. We're just outside of the booth. I'll be the one having a drink, having listened to the last speaker. So thank you all very much. Thank you for coming along.